Welcome to my next tutorial in my making web games series, and today we're going to be making our number guessing game. The point of this game is the computer's going to guess, or the computer's going to randomly generate a number, and then the user is going to have a certain amount of guesses to guess that number. So I've found the most fun is 6 guesses and a random number from 1 to 100. So to get started with this, we're going to start with the HTML. And I want to give a title or a header. So I'm going to type H1 number guessing game, and you can stylize this with CSS if you'd like. If you want to pause and review that, that's fine. Let's give this game a description. Guess a number from 1 to 100. You have 5 guesses. So we have our header, we have our description, and now I'm going to add 2 more things with HTML, but they're going to have IDs. I'm going to add a paragraph tag with a feedback ID, and it's going to start as empty. So remember, when we give an item an ID, that means that we can set its inner HTML in JavaScript. So remember, the inner HTML is the middle. You can kind of think of this, this opening H1 tag and this closing H1 tag as the outer HTML. Well, these words in the middle is the inner HTML. What this is going to be, the point of this paragraph tag, is when we guess incorrectly, I want to set the inner HTML to, guess higher, guess lower. Or when the user gets it right, I want to set this to you got it. So this is going to be a constantly changing paragraph tag. And that's the point of JavaScript. It makes your websites constantly changing. So this is going to be empty for now. Once the user takes their first guess, we'll get words in here. Second thing I'm going to add, another paragraph tag, this one with the ID of number display. And what that will do is display the correct number once the user guesses it, or once they're out of guesses so they know what it was. And we got to set this blank at first, but then in the JavaScript later, once he either runs out of guesses or once he gets it right, this will display the number. And that's all we need for the HTML there. Now to start with the JavaScript, we're going to create variables to represent these 2 paragraph tags. So the first one, the feedback, I'm going to call feedback equals document dot get element by ID feedback. And just note there is no magic between naming the variable and naming the variable after the ID. I didn't even do that intentionally. I just have no other idea for the variable. I think feedback is just fine. The next thing is the number display, which once again, I'm making this the exact same name as the ID, but there's no magic in that. It would work with a different name. By ID number display. There we go. So feedback and numbers display are set here. Now the next thing we're going to need is a constant number to represent the amount of guesses. I don't remember if I've already taught constant numbers, but a constant number is just a variable that doesn't change. But more importantly, you use the const keyword, max guesses, and then I'm going to set this to 6. So instead of var or let, I used const, and that tells JavaScript that we cannot change this variable. And I made it all caps because it's a good idea to make your constants all caps, just because it's easier to read. And now the next thing we need here, we have max guesses, feedback, number display. Actually, we can begin with the logic of the game. So here's how the game's going to work. We're going to use a for loop because we know the user is going to guess 6 times. So since we know the amount of iterations, I'm going to use a for loop. And what we're going to do is we're going to run the guessing code for 6 different times. So I'm going to type for let I be 0, I is less than max guesses I plus plus. And remember, I use let typically for a for loop because I is a temporary variable and I'm not going to use it anywhere else. So there's my for loop. What do we need to run 6 times? The guessing code. So it's going to work like this. Oh, and that's what I forgot. We need, obviously, a randomly generated number. So let's get that number. So var number is equal to, and this is just a review of random numbers. If you don't remember all this, you can go and review my random number video. It's going to be math.floor math.random times 101 plus 1. And that will give you a random number from 1 to 100. So now that we have that, we can get the guess. Var guess is equal to prompt guess a number. And once we have that guess, we can analyze, or we can compare it to the number with if statements. If the guess is less than the number, then we're going to do several things here. We want to tell the player to guess higher if the guess is too low, but we are no longer using console.log. That is a thing of the past for us, unless we're debugging. We are not going to use console.log. We're going to use our feedback tag up here, and we're going to change its inner HTML. So I'm going to type feedback.inner HTML equals guess higher. The next thing I want to do is I want to change the color of the feedback to be red, and I want it to stay red until they get it correct. So I'm going to change the color feedback.style.color equals red. That will change the color of that. And the last thing we need to do, actually that's all you need to do there. We're setting the color to red, and we're telling him to guess higher. Else, let's add that next statement. Else, if guess is greater than number, we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to cheat and copy and paste, but we're going to tell him to guess lower. Finally, if the only other possibility is if the user got the number right. So if he got it right, then the feedback.inner HTML should be you got it. And then the color should be green since the user got it right. And then we need to set the number display. I want to display this number. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the number display's inner HTML to the actual generated number. So number display dot inner HTML is equal to number. So we do one extra thing if the user gets it right. We just display the correct number there. And I'd like to make one change. I want to make the number display pretty big, so let's just add some CSS to this. Style equals font size 40 pixels. That way it will stay big. And so this is most of the mechanics or the brains, the logic of our number guessing game. The rest of this video is going to be over improving stuff because we're going to run into several problems. Let me refresh and show you. The first thing that we notice is it asks for a guess before it renders the page. And that's something I found out about prompt. The prompt function, we're going to have to learn an alternative for it in the future because it actually delays the rendering of a website. So what we need to do is delay the execution of this whole thing, of the whole game, so that this website here has enough time to render before we start getting guesses from the user. But I already showed you guys how to do a time delay with set timeout. What this does is it takes some function as an argument, like that. That's just my dummy function, does nothing. And then it takes the time it takes before that function gets run, and then it will run it automatically. So if I type 3000, that means that once the website starts, essentially, there will be 3 seconds before this function gets called. So what we can do is put this whole thing in a play function and then set the timeout of that play function to be like 1 or 2 seconds so that our website has time to render. So let's do that. Let's create a play function, function play, and I'm going to just cut and paste all of that code that we just made. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the timeout for play. So I'm going to specify play is the function we are delaying, and let's make it 1.5 seconds or 1,500 milliseconds. And that should allow the website to render first before we see this. So I gotta guess all the numbers, otherwise the website won't refresh. Okay, so that's something. Let's refresh now. And there you go. The website displays first before we even see before we see anything of the, wow, why can't I speak? Before we see the guess. Let's run that again. I'm just going to enter all 6 guesses immediately, refresh, and there, the HTML renders first. But now, let's notice the second problem. So when you're guessing from 1 to 100, I always start with 50 just to see if I'm too high or too low. But notice we get the same problem. I just used the guess, but the HTML did not have time to update. Right here, we told it to update either here or here. If the guess is greater than number or lower than number, then give the user some feedback here. But prompt, once again, prompt delays the rendering of a website, which means that we couldn't even see that feedback before the prompt function started again. So I actually, once again, can no longer see that HTML. So we solved it at the beginning, but now what we need to do is actually delay each and every guess so that we know so that we can see where we are if we need to guess higher or lower. And this is going to be a little bit more complicated. Let me enter all the guesses. So what we can do is set all of this inside the for loop. This right here is simply taking the user's guess and seeing if it's right. All of this can also go in a function, and since it can go in a function, it can be delayed. So I'm going to create a guess function, and we're going to do something a little complicated with this. But first, let me cut and paste all that code. And if I'm not sure, you guys probably already know this, but if like this code is tabbed too far, if you want to tab it back, just press Shift and then tab, and it will go to the left. Just a random note there. So now I can put the guess function here, and it runs the same, but we need to delay the guess function each time. How do we delay the guess function? We don't actually know how far or how long it's going to take the user to, because we could set timeout for guess to be maybe 3,000 seconds, and then I don't know, maybe try it again for guess at another 4,000 seconds or 5,000. But we're kind of guessing there. We have no clue how much time we need to delay, basically how much time to put here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delay the guess, but I'm going to use a new function you haven't seen before. Set timeout guess is what we're delaying, and here's what I'm going to put. Performance.now plus delay. Oh, plus I haven't created a delay variable, so let's create a constant delay variable, and it's going to be 1 second. So the code here is performance.now plus delay. What is performance.now? Performance.now is the time that essentially the time that this website has been running. And so when we say performance.now plus delay, we don't have to guess this number here. We don't have to guess when to run the guess function here. this code will automatically call the guest function 1 second later, or unless you just take too long, then it will delay. But otherwise, the guest function will be run 1 second later after performance.now. And what this will do, and let me be clear about this in case it's not clear. Set timeout, we would have to guess a number. Like, we don't know when the user's going to be ready for the next guess. If it is 1,000 seconds, 2,000, or sorry, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. We have no clue what this number is. But by using performance.now plus a certain delay that we choose, we can separate the guesses all by the same amount. So with that, let's run the code and we're going to find that we do have time to see the feedback. So we get the first delay. Uh-oh. Oh, that was long. That was just 1,005. Wow. That was a pretty long delay. I don't know what that was. I'm going to guess 50. And look, we actually get the feedback this time because we delayed it. So let me guess 40, or no, let's guess 25. So it's between 25 and 50. Let's guess 35. Okay, 35 and 50. Let's guess 40. Let's guess 46. And I don't know why the number displayed here. Was the number 40? And we get an extra guess. Huh. Okay, I typed in 40 for that last guess. For some reason, that actually showed me the number before I got it right. Let's see why that happened. I've practiced this tutorial several times. I have no clue why that happened. Why did it give me the number? So the only time we set the number display is if the correct guess is guessed here. Huh, and that shouldn't be possible with here, with this code. That's very weird. It just showed me the correct guess beforehand. Let's run that again. It's impartial. It wants me to, or no, it's very biased. It wants me to win. I'm gonna guess 50. I'm gonna guess 30. I'm gonna guess 40. So it's between 30 and 40, 35. Okay, 33, 34. Okay, so that ran better. I don't know what that last thing was. And with that, you have completed the basic number guessing game. And this is fun to do. I particularly like 1 to 100 with, why did I say 5 guesses? This should be 6. Look at me, I'm all over the place. Max guesses is 6. You have 6 guesses there. Sorry for that confusion. We are adding 6 guesses here. Now, I want to talk about one other thing before we conclude this video, because this is basically the end of the number guessing game. I want to talk again about prompt. In the future, we need to use something else besides prompt, and that will be the next topic of our video. But prompt is it's not the best way of getting user input because, as we saw earlier, it delays the rendering of the website. In fact, you can even see when the when the window pops up, and you try to refresh it, well, it's not showing there. Prompt delays the rendering of the website. And we have one other problem. If you were to guess the correct number first try, the for loop would still run all 5 other times. And you might ask, well, Matthew, why don't we just do a test? Let's make a win variable, var win equals false. When the user gets the correct number, we set win to true, and then if win is true in the for loop, we exit early. If win is true in the for loop, then exit early. And I didn't show you guys this, but to exit a for loop or any kind of loop early, you just type break. So you might think, well, wait a minute, Matthew, wouldn't this work? Couldn't you just create a win variable, set it to true if the user gets the correct guess, and then exit the for loop? But here's why that doesn't work and why we're going to be stuck with all 6 guesses. I'm going to console.log I, and I'm going to show you what happens. You would expect that we're going to see the number 0 because that's what I starts with in the console, and then we're going to get this window for our first guess. Then we're going to see 1, and we're going to see this window for our next guess. Then we're going to see 2, window for our next guess. So we should go back and forth between number and guess. But watch what actually happens here. Let me type in all the rest of these numbers, open the console, and run. And look, we got all the numbers before our first guess even loaded. Why did that happen? Shouldn't we be stuck on the guess function before we move on to our next iteration, our next repeat of the for loop? Unfortunately, that's not how the set timeout function works. What the set timeout function does is it sets an automatic calling time for this function given this time. But this line of code itself runs instantly. So all we did in this for loop is we logged the number and we set the automatic time for this function. That's why this for loop was able to run instantly. It's not actually having to wait for our user input because we're just setting an automatic time for that function to get called. So since the for loop runs and exits instantly, we have no chance to even check if win is true and try to break early. We have no way of setting win to true because the for loop is done before we even get our first guess. And so this is honestly the best we could do while we are still using prompts, and this is still a pretty good game. What we're going to do in the next video is improve on this project and learn an alternative way of using user input that does not require prompt, and then we will no longer require these time delays. Thank you very much for watching.